For those who don't know yet, Junction is this venue. Basically, it's a public venue where you can come and read books about Southeast Asia, and then we have also events related to Southeast Asia, all the aspects of Southeast Asia. So from the big challenges to more the pleasure of the arts and culture, etc. So today we have, this is part of a series actually with the TIFA Foundation. We are collaborating, which focus on displaced and uprooted people in Southeast Asia, so refugees, displaced people, resettled people, and forced migration. So this is the theme of the series, and this is the third event, and the detail will be given in more detail. Beside this space, we also have website, Facebook, and all the necessary social media to broaden our message, and today will be also shown online on Facebook page, so people that are not here also will be able to see all of you. So please, I have the honor again to have Carl Middleton, a colleague at the Master of International Development, which is at Chulalongkorn University. And yesterday we were in a meeting together, and I kind of forced him to accept to be a moderator in this. And he's an expert on this issue. So please take over.
It wasn't really forced. I'm really glad to be here and to come and actually discover Southeast Asia Junction. It's my first time, so I'm very glad to have finally made it. Sorry. Okay, so in this session is a really timely session looking at forced displacement, climate change, environmental change, and relating it to human mobility. So when we talk about human mobility, it's like lots of different forms. There could be human mobility in terms of forcibly displaced from different types of disaster. It could be voluntary forms of migration, or it could be planned movements, including by the state. So the role of the state may or may not play a role. I think we're very familiar in Southeast Asia. There are many different types of natural disaster, and climate change seems to be also exacerbating some types of natural disaster. So flooding events, drought events, and so on. And all we'll be discussing this. These will be the themes that we'll pick up in the session today. But then there's also, it's not just natural disasters that happen quickly, but also natural disasters that can happen slowly as well, so-called slow onset, such as droughts. One thing that, so Andrea brought a book that we recently published, which I'm actually not pitching, but more, it made me, so I'm not going to touch it, but it made me think a lot about what we mean by a natural disaster in the first place. And actually many natural disasters are not really so natural, even though we use the word natural to describe them. So sort of a deeper context, we can understand how development policies, for example, exacerbate some people being at risk and some people not being at risk. And so we can look at these longer term trajectories. And I think this is also very relevant to migration, because when you think about who moves to certain places that may be at risk from disasters, then that's like the sort of longer history is an important part. So I hope that the panelists will also pick this up. So there has been increasing recognition of the relationship between various forms of displacement and natural disaster. And this meeting is an expression of that, I think. So one well-known initiative, at least amongst the circles, was the Nansen initiative. And that was a global survey looking at the relationship between disaster and displacement. Several of the people on the panel have been involved in that, so I won't mention much. This ended, I think, a couple of years ago, right? And then it's been picked up again in a new platform called the Platform on Disaster and Displacement that the Stockholm Environment Institute is involved in, and I have it as well. So this is kind of picking up the insights that were gained between disaster and displacement and trying to translate it into policy that ultimately should translate into practice. And I think the other obvious example is the climate change negotiations. And maybe one question I actually have for the panel is how much have the climate change negotiations really addressed the question of mobility, and especially people that are most at risk? Because one of the, if you read, I'm sure that you read the outline of this panel, that climate refugees is an important topic. Islands are now beginning to flood underwater, and the question really becomes, if somebody becomes stateless, what are the responsibilities of global society towards these people? Like recognizing that they're often not responsible for these issues, but they will need support in various ways, and I think that some of the panelists will pick this up. So in overall, the broad questions that the panelists have been asked to address, one is, what are the causes what types of community responses has your research and work uncovered. Maybe some of it has been supported by civil society, others may be very much from grassroots upwards. And then also importantly, what types of responsibilities have the states taken on? So there have been initiatives relating internal displacement to state responsibility and duty, but many of these types of issues, especially in the context of climate change, are also upcoming and may become more intense in the future. So another question is what are the states doing? And then maybe beyond the national level of states, regionally in ASEAN, what is the ASEAN response? So we have three speakers, and maybe I'll introduce them now and then they can go one by one. So the first speaker is Andrea Tor. She's a research fellow at Stockholm Environment Institute, just over the road from here. The second speaker is Ratnawati Hussain. She is an assistant professor at Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta and also on the advisory board of the Indonesian Disaster Management Agency. And then the third is Emma Porio. She's a professor of sociology at Ateneo de Manila University, and she's also the chair of the governing council of the Philippine Social Science Council. So three very well qualified speakers, but also I can see a number of very well qualified speakers in the room that work on these issues. So with that in mind, it's very important that the speakers will keep the time so that we can have an engaging discussion afterwards. So with that, I will hand over to Andrea for the session.
Organizing this. I'm also very honored to be part of this panel with, I'm sure, much more experienced women on the panel than myself, but so I can be less experienced. Thank you. I guess my task this evening is very much to sort of provide a little bit of a context to the other two interventions, which will look much more into details and other aspects related to this topic. And as part of that context, I was asked to maybe provide some sort of numbers to give a bit of an idea of what we are talking about. And I have to say that for this part, as I'm not that much of a number person, I'm an anthropologist by training, so numbers are not really something that I deal with on sort of daily basis. But I really have to be thankful to the IDMC publication Green 2018, which just came out. I guess bumped into it a couple of weeks ago, so it really helped me a lot. So quite a lot of the sort of framing from that perspective will be based on that publication. But then I also wanted to sort of highlight some of the concepts that are involved in the discussion around mobility in the context of environmental and climate change. So just to start, should I use this one? No, can I just keep that on? I'm not saying it now. So, okay. So just to start with, and to say that, of course, as it was emphasized by Carl in his presentation, in his introduction before, environmental disaster, by now we know how very much they compel people to move to seek safer places, to possibly look for more secure and for more resilient livelihoods elsewhere in the immediate aftermath of environmental disasters, or even sometimes in longer term and sometimes sort of longer term after disasters. While migration in the context of environmental disaster is of course a new phenomenon, people have been naturally moving and as a result of human-induced disasters or natural disasters, as a result of slow onset degradation, which has displaced people in the past, of course. Environmental change, however, again, as it was emphasized before, and as well as population displacement, either voluntary or forced population displacement, has been identified by the international community as one of the biggest humanitarian challenges of the 21st century. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has also predicted an increase in frequency and severity of climate events, in particular when we talk about storms and hurricanes and cyclones, as well as long-term sea level rise, desertifications, which will impact upon people and their ability to maintain their livelihoods in certain parts of the world. There are some recent estimates which have shown how sudden onset disasters such as floods and cyclones are likely to displace an average of 13.9 million people each year globally. And these numbers, as I well understand, do not include preemptive evacuation in those cases. And in 2017 only, IDMC recorded 18.8 million new displacements associated with disasters. Just to put this more into sort of into perspective, 39% of all new displacement in 2017 was triggered by conflict and by violence, but 61% was actually triggered by disaster. Weather-related hazards are among the main triggers in this case, and most of the displacement is in fact being driven by flooding. And again, provide some numbers in this area, 8.6 million of displacements were related to flooding, while 7.5 million were related to storms. Now, Southeast Asia, together with the Pacific, actually, are among the most affected regions as far as 2017 is concerned, but this was the case also in previous years. In fact, the region contains what are called, or have been called in the literature, the hotspots, some hotspots areas. Those are areas where climate change impacts are likely to be greatest in scope and intensity. And among those areas are the densely settled deltas. In the region, as of course you know better than myself, the Mekong Delta in southern Vietnam and eastern Cambodia, as well as the Minam Delta around Bangkok. Now those areas are also hosting megacities, and they are experiencing even more population growth due to migration of various types, either urban to rural or international or intra-regional migration. Those are also especially vulnerable to impacts of rising sea levels. In fact, although of course islands are about to disappear most probably, but also cities such as Bangkok are not doing much better from that perspective. Increased storm surges and recurring flooding are also more perseverant lately, and those areas are also at risk even more so because they are also home to the poorest people. They are home to the least resource population in Asia, especially when it comes to the more peripheric areas of those megacities. And I think this connects us nicely to what Carl was saying before, that disaster is not only a matter of nature and environment, but it also relates to vulnerabilities that are already in place in many areas which are most prone to be hit by disasters. Disaster displaced 8.6 million people during 2017 in Southeast Asia, and this accounts for 46% of the global total. So again, quite a huge proportion here in the region. Differently from other regions, displacement in Southeast Asia occurs mainly within countries, so it's what is called internal displacement. Yet inadequate national responses to internal displacement are likely to increase instances of cross-border displacement in the future. And this was one of the outcomes of the Nansen Initiative's consultations, which did a number of researches and consultations in the region to look at what was happening actually on the ground. While the region is affected by both intense and less frequent but high impact disaster, but also extensive recurrent but lower impact disaster events, sudden onset disaster trigger most of the internal displacement recorded here. And in particular, if we think of two countries in the region, the Philippines and Vietnam are among the 10 worst affected countries in the world. With 2.5 million and 633 new displacement respectively in 2017, while Indonesia and Myanmar are ranked 12 and 13. So some of the most affected countries are here in the region. Now, also in this region, flooding is most common and recurring natural hazards, as we were saying before, and claims most victims as well as contributing to displacement. The number of people and assets exposed to floods and cyclones, for that matter, is in fact thought to have increased by around 70% between 1980s and 2015. And this is again largely because of the urban expansion of those cities. Many of those urban residents lived in slums and other settlements less able to withstand the impacts of natural hazards. And of course, many of you here in the room will remember the two cases that I sort of featured on the slide here. The tropical storm Tembin, known locally as Binta, which displaced 865,000 people in Vietnam and in the Philippines in December, as well as the tropical storm Kai-Tak in the Philippines, which displaced people in the Philippines and Malaysia also in December. Now, when it comes to the figures that I was presenting, I would say that they mostly refer to internal displaced people or IDPs. So we do have some definitions, let's say, around what displacement in the context of disaster may mean. And there is the UN definition for internally displaced people, as well as, again, the Nansen Initiative and the following protection agenda came with a definition which looks instead at people who are displaced across border but are also in need of help and support. Still, those are not concerned definitions. Not everyone agrees around them. And because of the absence of an internal consensus, IOM, the International Organization of Migration, also came up with what they call a working definition, which has proposed the definition of environmental migrants, and those would be persons or group of persons who, for reasons of sudden or progressive change in the environment that adversely affect their lives or living conditions, are obliged to leave their habitual homes or choose to do so either temporarily or permanently, and who move either within their countries or abroad. I think what's interesting about this definition is that actually brings in or connects some of the points highlighted in the previous two definitions and concerning the both internal and international or cross-border migration, and they also introduced the idea of temporariness or permanent migration in the case in those cases. However, we should anyway sort of understand that there is still not an agreed definition, and this may have several implications that we can discuss afterwards, implications related to governance, but also implications related to normative. So who is that has to take responsibility about people who are moving? Is it the local level state? Is it the nation? Is it the regional or international concern? As well as which is the body that should protect those people? Is it the Human Rights Convention that should also sort of protect those kinds of people? No time left for me. I think here, what I wanted also to highlight in another 1.5 minutes is that the reason why there is not a great definition here, and it's really related to the multiple causes of mobility. For those of us who come, as for myself, for instance, from a migration studies background, I do consider that there is a number of causes always behind people moving. So trying to encapsulate people moving within a definition which directs simply to issues related to climate change or environment related issues, it's very hard. There are issues related to the differentiated vulnerabilities that are already in place and which are enhanced maybe by climate change or environmental change. And in that case, we were discussing before here that, for instance, being a woman, but being a woman of a different ethnicity, or being a woman who lives, for instance, in a urban setting, and maybe sort of, not earning much, or being in a precarious job and housing, you will face the impact of climate change or the impacts of environmental change very differently, and that of course influences the kind of response that you may have, and therefore mobility. But we can go through other causes for which a definition is still not in place at this moment. I'll go straight to some of the concluding, some of the thoughts that I had for us here, and which I wanted to discuss maybe further in the discussion later on. And I think those relate to what Carl was presenting before, some of the ideas coming out of this recently published book, which looks in particular at a particular type of environmental change, and in this case of floodings. And I think here some of those aspects, or many of those aspects that we are discussing, which contribute to the complexities behind what mobility means in the case of environmental change in Southeast Asia, could be actually further addressed. And many of those really relate to those intersecting vulnerabilities already in place when the disaster strikes. They also relate to the fact that mobility in the case of disaster is actually related to patterns of mobility which are already existing in place. In a place like Southeast Asia or many other areas in the world, the fact that there is already in place a good system of mobility and transnational relations, for instance, that also impacts decisions on mobility on the ground. There is a number of other structural processes which are also involved, and we might go through those later on. And just one more thing, just because this is your fault, because you mentioned the platform on disaster displacement in your introduction, and of which SCI is part of. I think the interesting bit of the consultations that we held, the roundtable that we held at the SCI in December, is that people in the room who are stakeholders from different countries and organizations in the areas agreed that there is a need for some areas of research to still be filled nowadays. And of course, more data or specific data is in need there, and data which really relates to the multi-scalar and disaggregated data on the pre-disaster conditions on affected groups, as well as during and post-disaster. So we really need to know what the condition of people was before disaster and after disaster for us to really know how to address those intersecting issues. But also more nuanced understanding of post-disaster context, differentiated needs, access and management of resources. Those complexities which many times policymakers don't really like, because they are sort of go against the ability to really design a policy to respond to these issues. But also concepts and terminology still needs to sort of be sharpened, as well as the inclusion of local knowledge in what is our research, but also policy making. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're almost sticking to time. So I won't comment much now, because I'll just invite the next speaker to technology.
Thank you, God. Okay, let me change this. Looking for the poem. Okay. Thank you. I tried to be punctual since on the 12th minute, and I tried to bring the case in Indonesia. So I look at the displaced by the weather in the case of Indonesian natural disaster. I'm not talking a lot more on the migration in terms of like slow onset, but I'm going to focus on how actually this displaced by the flood. And just to give you the scale, when Andrea talked about the increasing or the frequency caused by the climate change in Indonesia in the last 15 years, the increasing number of flood, and it's really more and more on flood and cyclone and also landslide. That's mostly caused by the climate change. And to look at the last year only, actually the affected communities and displacement reached 3.5 million because of the flooding. This is only the big flooding. There are around 937 only for last years. So it's more and more increasing flooding. And my organization, I'm the advisory board of national disaster, but I also joined with the Muhammadiyah. Last year we responded 101 event, and 75% are flooding and landslide, flash flood and landslide. So you can see here how actually the flood and landslide or weather related disaster, it really affect Indonesia, and there are quite a big number, at least 77 of casualties, and also 35 million people affected, and some are in temporary displacement, and all the infrastructure. And some of the extreme weather that affected the IDPs. I talk it like short and long term because most of the flooding is only affected for like 2 weeks to 1 month. If it's a long term, it's the landslide, it could affect longer term. So I try to give the picture on what type of flood in Indonesia, just like the aerial part, riverine, coastal, and urban flooding. That's all related. Some are related with the monsoon and also the rain during the rainy season, and also with the changing envelopment because of the narrowing of the stream, river, and stuff is also affected, and also the housing settlement is also affecting the way the flooding in the urban areas, and also floods and landslide. Not always flood bring landslide, but in many cases flood is also creating landslide because in Indonesia we have 500 mountains. So everywhere in the hilly side is also bring landslide, and also landslide only because of the rain, the heavy rain in the hilly side also bring the landslide. So it's the different type of the extreme weather that creating the displacement in Indonesia, and also cyclone is getting more and more right now, and also become the highest hazard event in Indonesia right now compared to flooding, and drought is also in several places, and also abrasion and coastal erosion. It's become a huge problem for Indonesia because we have 14,000 islands. So when the coastal erosion occur, and then there is need to have the permanent displacement. So this type of what is the extreme weather impact on the IDPs, and this displacement from the flood and landslide right now hit the most in Indonesia, where the displacement of flood usually is more massive, 1,000. Last December there are around 32,000 people displaced in only in Pacitan. This is in Bandung, West Java 2006, and Pacitan, East Java 2017 is 32,000 people displaced. So this kind of massive compared to
eruption and earthquake. Usually the eruption and earthquake takes longer displacement and need to be relocated. But this is the example of what type of displacement. And also the impact on flood and landslide is the devastation of livelihood, especially in farming area and also in the coastal area. That's become a huge issue in Indonesia. For rural area, the farming and the food security become a threat right now, especially in West Java and East Java, where they produce the agricultural or paddies. And also the damage and property losses, mostly in urban area. Right now, more and more urban area hit by the floods and the flash flood, and then it's creating issues on the property damage. And then the social economy, because it's more and the poor, especially in urban area and also in the agricultural sector, they are more poor people live and got the stress, loss of job and livelihood threat, and then poverty increasing, business disruption, and social activities also halted. So this is all the impact that experienced mostly by during the displacement. And also the infrastructure facilities, road, school, market, offices, hospital are pretty much affected by the impact. And I just give you some of the issues in during the relief when talking about before. This is I'm talking not before, but during and post. During the relief, the problem in IDPs is first is access to basic needs such as food, clothing, shelter, water supply, and sanitation. Is delivery problem is also still a challenge for Indonesia because of the road system and then the facilities to distribute the thing. It's still one by one. It is still become a huge issue in the relief distribution, and also challenging in mobility. Many students cannot go to school or do businesses for the local people because of there is no transportation during the flooding or landslide or any other weather-related disruption, and also they cannot have the social activity. And the issue come up is also identified as gender-based violence. There are more and more right now, especially in the IDP scam, because most verbally, and sometimes they only make a hole for doing the temporary toilet, whatever in the room, and then they make everything and do some of the gender-based violence, and people cannot change clothing, and there is no room for doing things. It's also increasing. There are some of the study there are 13 types of gender-based violence because of during or happen in the IDP camp. And also the access to health, especially for children, women, elderly, is still huge issue, especially if you got like 32. Okay. Now, issues and recovery, since I only have 5 minutes left, most of the issues for long term is food and food security become a huge issue because who responsible? Yeah, in Indonesia, I will show later how the different ministry responsible. So it's very difficult for like coordinating and providing the long-term support on basic needs, and also issue on reconstruction. Who paid that? How long? And then the issue on relocation, because if like landslide need to be moved, where to move? Because especially in Java, because most of the victim or flooding right now occur in Java, where the half of the population in Indonesia, 145 million, live only in 18% of land in Indonesia. Java is only 18%, but occupied by more than half of population. So it's really dense and become a huge problem to relocate. There is no much barrier. You go up, it's a mountain. You go down, it's on the South Ocean. So there is no and then also health deterioration, and also the issue on livelihood restoration. Farming, urban informal sector is also affected. It's become a huge issue to provide the cash and capital, and then the infrastructure as well, because it's more and more. It's very frequently occur and it created more damage. And then the challenges right now is the local government policy, laws, regulation, and disaster management is still very limited, especially in the local. And also the funding for disaster management is still highly dependent on the state budget. So there is not many budget on the local, and then also community participation in reducing hazard risk is still lacking. It's not in full, and also lack of disaggregated data that's also mentioned by the. I just give some views on how is the role of in addressing the IDPs. In Indonesia, there are 3 agencies, the NDMA or BNPB, MOH, Ministry of Social Affairs, and they have some set of regulation on how to provide the cash fund and then procedure and delivering victim compensation and benefit. But most of the issue is on not match up, or in my personal study, all the basic needs usually addressed by government between 15 to 20%. The rest are actually addressed by the NGOs and then diaspora, and this is some of the example of the Ministry of Health. They also have the standard responding health house. They also provided shelter, health. So there is no coordination as well within the government. So 3 agencies provided the same shelter basic need, but there is no differentiation between what needs to be support. And I just go to the addressing the issue. I think somewhat similar to Andrea, that the problem on the data availability is also issue in Indonesia. People do not have any data before or after, or who are the vulnerable base data. The gender and age is not differentiated, so the response is very lack on understanding the people need or the community need, and also there are no minimum standard requirement in implementation. So it needs to have the people based on the right of the IDPs is still not been addressed, and then the multi-stakeholder approach. As I also did the research on the basic support. Since only 15 to 20% can covered by the government, the role of the NGO and faith-based organization are very strong in Indonesia. So we already advocate, for example, because I also the executive forum of the humanitarian forum, the forum of consists of faith-based organization, Muslim, Buddhist, Catholic, Christian, who work on disaster and humanitarian assistance. The role are very big, but it's not really coordinated and recognized by the government. So it's very important to work on the multi-stakeholder approach, and also the sustainable recovery, how to address the need of recovery based on the community needs, not based on the government need or the development needs, but how actually recognizing the community needs are very difficult, especially if you have so many different islands, that different archipelagos, country, different islands have different geography and geological background. And then the shifting paradise, I think, is my last thought. It's very important to start increasing awareness on the disaster risk reduction among the people. Thank you.
So much wisdom in so short a time. Thank you. So we'll move on to the final presentation. So moving from Indonesia to the Philippines. Time by Emma to give her presentation.
Where is it? All right. I'm many slides, but I only have one message. Climate disasters displace people, and they are continually displaced when they go to resettlement and relocation areas, and leads to other kinds of disasters. So the title of my presentation is Post-Ketsana and Post-Haiyan Marginal Communities in the Philippines, Displaced by Climate Disasters, but Reshaping Community Resilience. There are 4 arguments. Basically, that climate disasters intensify and exacerbate hazard impacts and evolving exposure and inherent vulnerabilities of the poor, the migrant. Okay. As I said, the beginning is that climate disasters disasters continually displaced and leads to disasters in resettlement areas, and especially when they go to the cities and join the urban poor that's already been displaced area. And also that traditionally, right now, the climate science and disaster science separates the hazard impacts on the poor, and I think this is result into the not being able to respond to the needs of the vulnerable populations. The IDP, can you hear me? Yeah. The IDPs, the women, children, and PWs. And so, in a sense, rural-urban mobilities are driven by what I call cascading disasters, political disasters, environmental disasters, and economic disasters. So, in a sense, the climate disasters drive displacement and also drives the disasters and continuous displacement in the resettlement areas. So weather events really in the Philippines is embedded. I think it has become so routine and and also the lack and the neglect has also become routine, and what I'd say the lack of responsiveness. So look at this. So case study 1, Kayan, you can see all the impacts, but really the history disaster. This is the 1912 disaster in B1 classroom, and then this is 2013 in the Hayan, and then this is 2013 in Tacloban, and then of course, so you know the impacts. There are 4 million displaced by Hayan, but 6 months after, we're still 26,000 in the temporary shelters, and 200,000 waiting whether they can go back and settle to their areas because of the no-build zone, and then a lot of the women were victims of trafficking and children to the urban areas and end up in domestic work or in street shops in cities. So the contextual drivers really of IDPs to the cities is driven by this. So case study 2 is Kitsana in 2009, and see how much impacts there are economically, politically, and otherwise. And really, I would say that the threat to urban resilience and of the IDPs is really the existing long history of poverty, inequality, and social exclusion. This is a picture there of the IDPs after Hayan camping in Metro Manila, and also victims of the cascading disasters like the Zamboanga sheds, the flooding, and the Marawi sheds. All of those end up in the city really in markets. So the increasing risks also of the IDPs is also intensified by the population explosion in cities, that the services really are not anymore, it's bursting in the cities. So when it's joined by internally displaced people, it intensifies and magnifies the problem. So in a sense, when you say, when they go to urban areas, really, they are settled in danger areas and in water-ridden areas, and they're exposed to geohazards. But really, the issue really of, these are happening because of the lack of enforcement of zoning laws. It's because it cannot enforce because of the lack of housing and security interest. And really, I'd say that the IDP search for home and is connected also to the continued contestation of urban spaces wherein there's intense economic activity and intense real estate development that really drives the land to be very expensive, and it drives the poor to very undesirable places, danger areas to settle, because there's no other choice. So in a sense, between the state and the citizens, the struggle for land and displacement, and their continuous loss that really force them to go to the far distant places. I always say 50 years of failed resettlement, putting them to the far distant areas. It seems we have not learned anything. And so when we say that the contestation of urban spaces, people wanting to develop it for economic and development uses. So for example, this high rise here is just opposite
my place and near Ateneo, and it's 300 meters from the earthquake fault. And really, when you say that, what is safe? When you say we must put people in safe and secure spaces, but they have been living in these spaces, and they have constructed over time a kind of security and community, and that protects them during fires and floods. And really, I'd say that danger zones are homes to the people who are rural urban migrants, but the state basically thinks that they should not be staying there because the state is not able to protect them if they will continue to stay there. So you have to be relocated, you have to be evicted, but really in the interpretations of what is secure, what is unsecure, and what is safe for the people. So in a sense, when you say that the understanding of risk and danger areas and resettlement analysis, and what is really meant for providing security, whether housing or livelihood security, was very contested. So it's a contestation between both the insiders, the community of the urban rural poor and settlers, and the interpretation of the outsiders, the regulators, the users of space, and the ones regulating the space and saying you should not be staying there because it's dangerous for you. So in a sense, what I'd say that people have really constructed a life, a form of resilience because of all these difficult circumstances, but the state will not let you continue there because then, they are not constructing a city that for them is, appropriate for how a modern city should be like. So in a sense, I'd say that danger is very much informing the survival and resilience strategies of people, but this is not recognized by the state as legitimate ways of living, and the state is always trying to evict them to other places. So I'd say that in terms of responses, strategies of the community in trying to survive, and that really, while we tell the state that you should be sensitive to the 3 Gs, gender, generation, and geographies, really, in terms of what I call how resettlement areas, resettlement issues are designed, it's very much dominated by the technical experts and the community, which basically knows how it is to survive and to sustain, is really out in the decision-making process. In fact, we were discussing earlier that we always say, engage the women and participate with women, and the women will tell you, participation leads to my further, I'd say, oppressive conditions, because we end up doing so much work because you happen to speak up what are the needs of the community. So it's a double-edged sword, I'd say. And I would say that people now talk about how to keep the procedures just and how the distribution of resources being also just. But I think there's a lot of, I'd say, a lot of desirable things to happen there. So I'd say that what did we learn in the monsoon floods? That communities take care of themselves because the government only come much later at all. Women also become very important resource for rehabilitation, and also making makeshift arrangements during flooding and makeshift bridges. And also spiritual women, migrant women, and their spiritual is a double-edged sword. They'd say that, spirituality makes us more resilient and bounce forward, but actually it also becomes used sometimes as a way of keeping, it's okay, they are resilient, they are able to bear it, and spirituality sometimes covers it both ways. So this is, this is a gender disaggregated costs of before, during, and after Kidsana. You'd say that women households pay more. And also, the procedure in the right after floods is that if you do not evacuate, then you do not get assistance. The because that's to encourage people to evacuate so that they'll be out of harm's way. But actually, we look at it, it's all women and children. So by having the procedure actually results to some people not getting it, because those people who refuse to leave their homes because of afraid of thievery and things like that do not get assistance. So when you say procedural justice or injustice, and this is how it happened, after every floods, the poor and the internet displaced people are always blamed for clogging the waterways. But this is the map of all informal settlements in Metro Manila. But the result of our research in Manila Observatory actually shows that 70% of the clogging of the waterways in Manila is done by formally permitted development. So it's the wrong, if you tell them about this data, you will not believe it. They think it's always the poor that Okay, so in a sense, what we really should do in terms of listening to what should work is really tough. The example is NGOs have been looking at people's planning in response to disasters, and also putting the preparedness in order really, and putting the role of the community, especially the social capital of the people during disasters. And really, we are trying to say that the effort should be integrated at the household, the community, and the local government level, but that's a desired one. Because in reality, they are all fragmented and they don't see each other. So we hope that we should be able to do these kinds of initiatives, that people's initiative are linked to those who are delivering resources, as well as the decision making. In order to prevent this, is the homeless people under the bridge waiting for the flood to survive, to subside, and then more like this. And I would say that in conclusion, I'd say that we should understand the evolving exposure and inherent vulnerabilities of poor people and IDPs, because they are all together, and also that the co-generation of knowledge, whether at the scientist level and the community and the policymakers, should be integrated, convergent, and socially inclusive. And also that risk reduction and rural-urban mobilities for IDPs in the city must reconcile with the cascading disasters of climate, political, economic, and cultural forces, the identity politics associated with what I call procedural and distributive justice, and socially inclusive recovery policies should support people's resilience initiatives. And I believe that the Filipino spirit
Amazing.
Did I follow the...
I think maybe even finished early.
Because I was afraid of you.
Oh, not so scary.
I'd say you too.
I can't possibly summarize all of this, but just a couple of things that jumped out at me that I hadn't really thought about so much. I think Andrea's presentation gave us a really good overview of the trends globally, and I think also demonstrated that this is emerging up the global policy agenda. And then she emphasized that in Southeast Asia is one of the regions most at risk globally, and so this needs our attention. And then started to unpack some of the challenges I think we'll be discussing in the rest of the session. Ramawati then pointed out the role of the state and the limitations of the state, emergency relief and recovery. Some of the things that actually probably need to pay a lot more attention to, like gender-based violence in the IDP camps after a disaster. I think, for me, I don't come across much literature on that. So these are things that probably need more recognition. And I just came, the reason that this is interesting to me is I just came back from Hatay City studying a similar situation, but actually where there's quite an impressive response and collaboration between the state and the community. And so I am sort of listening to these, and there are also some good examples, but still many challenges around. So, for example, like you said, the recognition, having the state recognize the role of communities and their contributions is an important challenge to overcome. And then both Andrea and Ramawati have pointed out that data is still an important issue, so an important role for researchers. And then Emma, we just heard the presentation, like many important points made. but especially emphasizing the historical dynamics of urbanization and how we need to place people at risk in the context of poverty and so on. So it's not just about IDPs, but like understanding the deeper processes. And then also emphasizing, I think, towards the end that the actual idea of justice is really important when we think about these issues. So I'm not going to keep on going on because I can see that there's many people, I'm sure, many points to make. So can I invite comments or questions to the panelists? Can you introduce yourself? Maybe many of you know each other already. But then also maybe just stick to one key point that you want to make or one question so that we can have as many people comment as possible. So the floor is open. Okay.
My name is Baba from Jesuit Refugee Service. So I think this is for the three of you. You're talking about human mobility perspectives, I think, coming from the sedentarian point of view. My question is, how you are switching it? So if you are taking it from the nomadic point of view, should we also call it like a migration, or this is just a natural course of living because of the nomadic point of view? I'm giving an example also. When the Volga siege happened, it's actually violence. It pushed, I think, the Wajau people to become sedentary. They lose their jobs because they are always moving around between Philippines and northern part of Indonesia. But if you are kind of switching it point of view, will the same kind of analysis came out, or we have a different analysis of the natural cause of the environment solution?
Okay, excellent question. Other questions?
Hello, my name is Prat from the Nation newspaper. I would like to ask two questions.
One question.
Okay, what question is okay? Do you think the government of Southeast Asia is ready or have enough awareness on the mission to increase the climate resilience to the people to adapt to climate change and all the disaster? Thank you.
Okay. There's a journalist privilege apparently. You're allowed two questions. Do you have a second question?
Well, another question I would like to ask whether in the future, what is the trend of the displaced from the disaster in Southeast Asia? How will it be increased or intensify? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name's Alan Beatty. I'm a freelance researcher. This is a very broad area. We didn't touch on the slow onset of environmental concerns that cause people to migrate over a period of time. One thing that was brought up, I think, in the Indonesian presentation was that we need to know what were the causal problems or what were the issues in and situations pre-existing before a disaster or whatever happened and before the displacement, in order to know how to deal with the situation afterwards. And now in relation to this, there's an issue that's close to my heart in that a lot of rural development work has shifted because of the funding sources largely and because of climate change to environmental concerns related to disaster relief, not disaster relief, risk mitigation, and then climate change mitigation programs. And so the people that are often employed on a lot of these programs are natural resources persons and resource management people. Now, if we want to understand the situation of these villages before and after, shouldn't we we have community development workers, anthropologists, sociologists, so that we really have an in-depth understanding of what's going on.
Okay, excellent question. You're asking the right people. Because we'll just take 3 questions first and then we'll come for a second round if that's okay. I think we have time for several rounds, right? Okay, does the question follow on from the agendas? Okay.
It's just a comment on this.
Okay.
I had already this in mind in terms of something that really comes up, and it was one of the questions that Andrea brought up. It's like, really at the normative level, then who is really involved? Should be the at the UN level, UNFCCC or other organizations. And I think the point that is raised here that was at different levels is that the issue is so complicated and has so many layers that actually there should be much more conversation between different practitioners that have actually an understanding of the different angles of the issue, while at the local level, at the policy level, at the international level, it's still very much divided. And actually, something that we see very much, that I've worked a bit on climate change adaptation, mitigation, etc. Usually what we say is that the disaster risk management people don't speak to the climate adaptation people, and this is an extra layer. And then they don't speak to actually the migration people, the anthropologists that can actually tell you what's going on.
And who speaks to the community, I wonder?
Exactly. So it's just to follow up on that. At this point, it's a point that one should bring at every level, and it's a big and open question.
I have a short anecdote just in response, and then we'll go to the panel. So, in the process of researching the book, I was looking at the relationship between flooding and migration in Cambodia around Tonle Sap Lake. And so you have a well-known organisation, the Mekong River Commission, that produces a lot of knowledge, and they produce a State of the Basin report every 4 or 5 years. And actually, when you use a PDF search for the word migration in the report, it has many of them, but it's all fish migration. So actually, there's no relationship between the social dynamics of people movement and the way that the river floods and moves and creates disaster. So there were actually, related to this comment, there are some points on co-production and knowledge, but let's go through from the beginning, pretending to be anthropologist first.
Absolutely agree with your point, and I think the disconnect is not only between practitioners or people who work in the development sector and go down to the communities, but even among researchers there is no communication. And I have to say that even in places where you won't expect it, that it's just so difficult to translate issues of inequality, of social character to people who are actually much more sort of conversant with the technical, let's say, language. And this is something that I'm experiencing myself as well, even in my working place, where we should be all addressing the different layers related to the impact of climate change or environmental change. Still, that doesn't happen. I'm hoping that at least some of the new, master courses or PhD courses are a little bit more enlightened, but I think that's still something, it's a struggle. I think you also mentioned the importance of the causes of what's there before the disaster strikes, and that was one of the issues that we discussed, for instance, also during this roundtable with the platform for disaster displacement, which brought together really different type of actors from NGOs, international organizations, practitioners, policymakers, researchers, as ourselves, and that was one of the main requests when it comes to new research or new information that we need to collect. Is really this information that bridges the gap in between before and after, and also what is in between. Also because that kind of information also allows you, for instance, to answer questions of voluntary versus forced migration. The sort of division is not that straightforward, as well what are the other really causes for what we call displacement for environmental? The relationship is not as straightforward. Has to be.
Does somebody want to pick up the interesting question, the first question about nomadic people?
I think the problem. Friedman, who wrote the book, World is Love, and now is in the age of acceleration, is saying that really who will survive in this age is really that we need multiple coalitions that coalesce about each of the, with different mindsets and differentiated mindsets. And I think it connects to what is the perspective. And I think what really is that we're using old mindsets, old frames. Actually, the situation now calls for reframing. Like, for example, what I told you about when IDPs displaced by Haiyan and Ketsana joins the other previous migrants displaced by climate. It's the same formula that is used by the state. It's the same concepts. It doesn't work anymore. It calls for more fluid, negotiated approaches, but it's not there. So I think it's not about whether you use the nomadic or the permanent or temporary. I think we need to come together issues of how historical disasters and poverty and inequality has been constructed and reconfigured in the cities and the settlement areas. So I have no answer about what kinds of perspectives, but all I know is that the perspectives that are used now that's not informed, does not work. I want to respond to about whether from the journalist. Well, in the Philippines, basically, the climate scientist projection shows that there will be less number. We get an average of 20 typhoons. They said there will be less, that will be more intense. Also, the drought, and it will be drier and warmer, and it will be mostly in Mindanao. Yet our investment is in water-intensive rice production, when we should be going towards climate-resilient upland cropping systems. So there are just so many things that we have to do.
There's a specific question.
There is no specific question, but I would like to respond first. Looking at the trend in Indonesia, will be more and more. I mean, the increasing, like my organization respond, like in 2015 is only like around 50, right now last year is 101, and mostly 75% to 80% are flooding. So it's really increasing more and more weather related, and also in some areas like the drought is also some issue. So that's slow onset it become concern, although it's not only in all island, mostly at the eastern part, like in near the East Timor, and also in some part of Java. But the concern here is whether it is forced or voluntary migrant, but it happens frequently. So the displacement it could occur 3 times in a year, and how it influences the welfare of the people, the social justice, and then the equal for the livelihood and distribution of the economic distribution has become more and more reducing the welfare of the society because of the flooding. So it's really become a big issue. Regardless of the definition, but I definitely agree about the need of collaboration. Right now, we are increasing more and more collaborative approach in Indonesia. I myself is half in the government, half in NGO, half in the university, so it's like I have 3 legs, and it's not easy. 3 legs right now at my people, but it's also it's really not easy to bring together all different players to sit together to agree on the definition and also work together how to address some issues. So it's really energy, and also the way the UN system, the international organization, doing the same business in putting all the funds and grants. So there is no change if you got the same way of doing the thing. So
Honestly speaking, we need more three-legged people.
Actually, I want to follow up a little bit on what you said and the question that we had before. What you're saying that it's needed, I think, a lot of us that are doing research are pretty much aware that we need to change the mindset, we need to adopt different approaches, etc. However, the reality is also that at the end of the day, let's put it on the table, the majority of the people are being affected are the poor, number one. Number two, we have more and more governments in the region that do not care. There is a retreat of concerns related to human rights. So how, over and above the issue of, let's say the technical aspect of the approach, etc., the definitions and the mindset of the communities or the researchers, how do we deal with these kind of issues at a moment that basically human rights and care for the people is in retreat?
Any other? Okay.
I suppose in connection to what has just been said, my comment is not action-oriented. I mean, we've been talking about lack of responses, etc., or responses of, let's say, communities themselves. But I guess connecting to what has just been said is a sort of big picture comment. I mean, I have this ambivalent attitude towards the idea of environmental migration or climate migration, largely because it is so depoliticized. In the first place, what are the drivers of inequality of people who most experience the impacts of disasters? And secondly, this idea, and something that Carl said earlier, this idea of naturalizing disasters, whereas in the first place, this actually hides the political causes of such disasters. I think there has to be, in as much as there is an effort to link arms and be less of silos, I think there's also an effort to sort of rethink and reframe, as Emma was saying, our notion of disasters and our notion of why in the first place are people, certain groups of people, experiencing disasters more adversely and more disproportionately than others. Thank you.
Lloyd Abraham from Thammasat University. My question is triggered by the last speaker, but it's to all of you, including your example. We're all, I'm sure, familiar with that idea of the sort of potential conflict between the technocrats and community adaptiveness and community resilience. Do any of you have any examples of where it's actually worked? Where there's been good practice of collaboration between technocrats, governments, and community resilient processes? Are there any ways of life for us to look at?
Very good question and a good challenging question. I have an answer, but I will throw to the panel first. Sure. Okay. Well, okay. So I mean, this also comes to my mind a lot as to how do you can you find good responses? Firstly, I think there are good examples out there. Like I mentioned, the visit to Hatyai. So they had a major flood in 2010, and then that kind of instigated a strong desire for a response afterwards to do better in the future to deal with major flooding. So I think one factor in terms of bringing people together to actually act constructively was the shared idea that something had to be done. The municipal government was under pressure because many people felt that during that 2010 flood there was not an adequate response from the government. then a project came along called ACEN that had an interesting model. And at first, so these are very tentative findings on my part now. Maybe some of you might be even more familiar with this project. But the emphasis was first on community resilience. So building actual social processes in the community. So one household would be the warning household. One household would be, or several households would be so-called community support households. So if another flood happens, some houses had already volunteered that people could come and stay in their houses because they have 2 floors in their house, so it would be above the flood. And then there was also monitoring households that sort of monitor the level of water in rivers nearby. So I think that was quite a sort of constructive response. And interestingly, it started with the civil society groups working within 1 or 2 communities, and then the state scaled it up. But we don't know how effective it will be in the long term because there hasn't been another major flood since 2010. So I think over time, the imperative to maintain these structures may be weakened. But the main lesson that I was thinking I learned from the last week visiting was the sort of social dimension of flooding, of managing these big disasters is really important, including reproducing it. But then it relates to the challenge because how do you, if a lot of the response is kind of local, because disaster happens locally and you need state support coming outside, but at the same time a lot of things happen on the ground in a place. So how do you maintain those structures and how do you share them? So when the sort of pilot initial communities were seen to be sufficiently able to respond, then the state said, we can extend it. But then if the investment in the process is not the same to actually build the community structures, then you have a structure that's on paper but not socially in practice. So there are some interesting examples, but maybe not as widespread. And I think the challenge is not just finding those examples, but then sharing them in a way that takes them from one specific location with a context to a very different locations. Does anybody else like to?
I also want to give the example, the last flash flood in Bima in West Nusa Tenggara. There's also a good example between the government, the community, and also the private. So how actually right now is the ability of government support in terms of the midterm planning. They have to incorporate the activities of the community into the local planning for the short term and the midterm, and then it's also helped by the private. And most of the example in Indonesia actually occur for the in Bali for the eruption, and also in Jogja for the Merapi eruption as well, but not that many for the flooding. So that's because people tend to have more adaptive life in for the flooding, but most of the example, the good example between the technocrat and community and also the private occur in the eruption. Yeah, it's sequence.
So there's time for brief final comments from the other two, and then we should run.
Okay, maybe I could address your comment, but just by saying that I don't think there is much to do. If you think that ASEAN, the only migration or mobility within the region that actually recognizes and pushes for is highly skilled migration. Now, displacement, migration, and displacement in the context of disaster is not on the table when this kind of discussion are happening in the region. So, of course, this is not going to bring us anywhere if that's not included. I also wanted to maybe just throw it there as a food for thought. When of course, I do appreciate the local sort of community level type of involvement and strategies to really address the issues that are there. But I'm also kind of careful when I think that there is a lot going on now, also globally when we talk about disaster and mobility around issues of adaptation or using migration as an adaptation. Now, of course, that could be a solution. People do adapt, find their strategies. They might migrate. They have connections in another country. They send back remittances. So we find a way to deal with the disaster. But I'm thinking then, what is the role of the state? What is the role of the local government? What is the role of the international development community? Are they just trying by using this discourse to kind of, hold back and not sort of deliver to their responsibilities? So again, it's much more complex, the relationship, I would say.
I think the problem basically is that we think of environmental displacement as something that's momentary or it just happens. It does not happen regularly. But the fact of the matter is it happens regularly and it is a routine thing, yet our laws and policies behave as if it is not routine. And to start with, laws and programs and policies cannot even respond to the already vulnerable groups, the urban and rural poor. Intensify that with displacement, then the more they become fragmented, they become used, it's really unresponsive. So I really think that we have to, it needs a massive, rethinking and massive reframing, but institutions are not known for that. Bureaucracies are known for fragmentation. And in fact, in my example, I'd say that people work despite the system. And so when you say, okay, what do we do now? I really think that there international organizations, we are so, business as usual. And in fact, I came from southern Philippines, and I was shocked that Ormoc, this is a victim of flooding disaster in the 1990s, it has become so dependent on external support. So what kind of internal capacity can you build when you inhabit there, you do the planning? And in fact, I was telling to my friend at Asia Foundation, I said, my God, Steve, the rehabilitation resilience building has become a series of job orders for consultants. So, this is an actual, we've been working with a lot of local governments on building internal capacity to do hazard analysis and so on. But if external people are there and it doesn't encourage to build your own capacity to analyze and to decide what's there. So as you can see, I'm hopeful and yet not quite hopeful.
I think that's a really good place to end. That's a fantastic summary. Thank you to our three panelists for a really engaging discussion.